chopping mall, but there's no chopping happening at all.
Lights, camera, action.
Welcome to the Cinema Dive. My name is Nathan, and today we're jumping into the 1986 cult classic Chopping Mall.
But you're never alone in the chopping mall.
What's that?
What? You've never heard of it? Okay, let me give you a non-spoiler preview of this before we break it. The one thing you have to remember is that this story was put together in about 24 hours. The script was written in just a couple short weeks, and this is very short compared to modern day movies. However, this was the thing of the 80s, was putting out so many movies, they just had to work those scripts as fast as possible, which kind of led us to the B-movie genre that just seemed to populate the 80s overall. So the premise is pretty simple. Bunch of young adults who want to have a party in the mall after hours ends up tangling with some robots that were supposed to be mall security that now have turned into, well, killer bots. And I mean, I can't really say much more without going into deep spoilers for this. But what I can say is this movie is definitely worth the watch. It's a fun 80s cheesy horror movie. You're not going to get scared, but you might enjoy it a little bit. Plus, it's barely over an hour, so you're not going to invest too much time into it. So definitely go watch that. But hey, we're about to jump into spoilers, and if you'd rather just have the cliff notes, then stick around and let's find out what happens.
I guess I'm just not used to being chased around a mall in the middle of the night by killer robots.
Starting off, the movie was directed by Jim Wynorski, which didn't really ring a bell for me, so I went and looked at all of the movies he's made. I don't recognize any of them, but some of those titles look like they're a little bit of soft porn. Okay, so the movie starts in the mall with a bunch of people gathered around listening to kind of a sales pitch, and then the guy who created these robots comes out to show them what they can do. Shows that they have tasers, they have sleeping darts, and they can basically detain any criminal and keep them all safe, along with installing new steel security doors that lock the mall down tight from midnight till 6 a.m. Seems like a good idea, right?
Absolutely nothing can go wrong.
Well, there's a group of guys that work at the furniture store who want to party while the owner's away. Now, 3 of them have girlfriends, and the 4th one is kind of the more nerdy character in this. Also, he's the one in charge of the store, so he's a little hesitant at first. But one of the other girls brings her single friend, so they all match up.
Hey, look, don't force me to pull rank.
Look, guys, this party is gonna happen, but we need a little teamwork, okay? Besides, if the place looks like shit on Monday, it's all our asses. You got the beer?
Greg, come on. Dude.
Stepping forward to that night, basically a freak thunderstorm happens, and as we know, lightning carries some evil entities in it sometimes, strikes the building, and it goes into the power system that the robots are powered on. Instead of short-circuiting them, like probably it would, it makes them turn into, well, killer robots, and immediately kill the technician who's there monitoring the store's security. These killer robots now even ignore the security badges that all employees were given to prove that they work at the mall to keep the robots from bothering them, and they set off killing mall employees left and right. While this is going on, the party's in full swing. Booze and sex are rampant, as they are in any 80s horror movie. Well, except for the 2 single people, because they're sitting awkwardly on a couch watching a movie while everyone's having sex in the furniture store around them. Now, if you know anything about 80s horror movies, or technically a majority of horror movies throughout time, you know that they're breaking 2 of the cardinal rules. You don't know the rules of a horror movie? Let me have Randy explain them.
Don't you know the rules?
What rules?
You don't... Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever any circumstances, say, "I'll be right back," because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
So they've already broken 2 right off the bat. Later in the night, everyone seems to be winding down when one of the girls asks her boyfriend to go grab her a pack of cigarettes from the vending machine. As he does, he's encountered by one of the robots, who he shows his ID, but the robot promptly hits him with a tranq dart and then cuts his throat.
Here. Klaatu, Barada, Nikto, okay?
Now the girl who wanted the cigarettes goes out looking for him, and she's a little irritated, thinking he's blown her off. Well, she comes and finds his dead body lying there, and is taken out with extreme prejudice from the killbots, because it appears that their lasers that were meant to cut through debris have now turned into some sort of plasma rifles. I don't remember those being mentioned at the beginning of their countermeasures. Then a game of cat and mouse happens with the survivors in this furniture store. At first, they try and escape through the ventilation system, but only the girls are able to make it before the robots are also able to pull out their next hidden gem, which is some sort of foam or plastic explosive they use to blow open a door. Where are they getting all these? Did the lightning really give them all this stuff? The boys then run off to the gun store to try and get weapons to fight, while the girls are meant to go to the parking lot and get out. However, one of the girls starts having a panic attack, basically, and wants to go help her boyfriend. So they do what any sane people would do, and they go and make gas bombs. Now, this turns out bad for one of the people, and I would show the clip, but however, the clip itself was actually shortened for the movie to keep them from getting an NC-17 rating, and I don't want to test it here on YouTube. So go watch the movie, because it's a pretty intense death scene. But now the boys are armed with a shotgun, an M16, and a little .38 revolver. Why did he go for the revolver? I don't know. There were so many guns in that store. But they start fighting back to little effect, as the guns seem to have almost no effect on them. In fact, they even try blowing one up with a propane tank, and it just gets right back up. In fact, their first kill doesn't even come until they're able to get one trapped in the elevator and use propane tanks to blow the cables and drop it inside the elevator. Now, slowly they whittle down how many robots are left and how many people are left. Pretty much we get down to our 2 survivors, Ferdy and Allison, the 2 single people who weren't having sex and who weren't drinking. However, towards the end, Ferdy takes a fall, and all of a sudden, Allison sees a lot of blood near his head, thinking the worst, thinking Ferdy's died. Oh no. So she runs in terror to try and get away from the last killer bot. So she runs to the paint store. She starts taking all the paint, opening it up, and spilling it all over the floor. Mind you, she doesn't get a single drop on herself. Now, she then adds some what appears to be paint thinner into the mixture, then grabs a flare and hides, and waits for the bot to crash through the window with reckless abandonment, get stuck on the paint, where she can throw the flare and destroy it.
Have a nice day!
And bum-ba-ba-ba, her knight in shining armor Ferdy appears, only to simply have had a minor cut on the back of his head. And we pan out. End of movie. Short synopsis, short movie. Like I said, it's barely over an hour long. Now, there's not much to rip apart to this. It's a cheesy 80s kind of slasher flick to an extent, and it's basically what you get. There's no real hidden message in this one, which I kind of tried to look for to see if there was, because they did place this in a mall. Now, when George A. Romero did this 8 years prior in his movie Dawn of the Dead, he wanted to make a statement on American politics and American consumerism. But that just wasn't the case in this Chopping Mall movie.
Things that you're talking about here sound like just a bunch of people talking, a bunch of scientists without actually figuring it out.
This is not not the Republicans versus the Democrats. They've got us in the hole economically, or we're in another war. It's more crucial than that. We are down to the line, folks. We are down.
It's really all over, isn't it?
Quiet
here. Unemotional.
Quiet.
Simply, it was a bet whether they could make a horror movie in a mall or not. So they took the bet, and they made one. Now, talking about the actors, I really didn't recognize any of their other bodies of work besides some soap operas. It seems to be what a lot of them went. In fact, the only person I recognize is the janitor who gets electrocuted in the beginning of the movie. His name is Dick Miller, and I recognize him from Gremlins, and I recognize him as the pawn shop owner in Terminator before the Terminator blows him away.
You can't do that.
And in all honesty, I was born kind of in the late 80s, so a lot of these actors do escape me because a lot of them basically acted throughout the 80s and then stopped pretty promptly. In fact, some of these actors in here only have 4 or 5 credits to their name. But let's go ahead and talk about their acting. In no way was I expecting to be blown away by the acting in this. But I wasn't completely in side stitches from the terrible acting. It was decent to some respect, depending on which actor you're talking about. But of course, it's that cheesy 80s B horror movie. And when I say B horror movie, I'm not saying that they tried to make it a B horror movie like we do nowadays and then put those out. This was done by accident, and I love the ones that are done by accident. I think they have a lot more charm to them when they're made a B horror movie just because that's what they turn into. Not because someone said, let's make a B horror movie. Now, it came off as a B horror movie because of its extremely low budget. Its budget of the time was under $1 million, which, even compared to other movies of its time, that's pretty low, and making anything for under $1 million is a challenge. In fact, they wanted to use the Beverly Center for the mall. In fact, that's where most of the exterior shots are from. However, they didn't have the money to book it. They ended up filming at the Sherman Oaks Galleria in LA, which is where the 1985 movie Commando, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, was actually filmed. But once again, because their budget was so low, they had to only record when the mall was closed. So they had a very short window of recording time, and they had to get everything done, stunts, all that, done in those short hours. Even with the diminished shooting time, they actually still filmed this movie in about 22 days. Now, something I'm curious about in these old horror movies, and even some of our more modern horror movies, is the implication of morality. What do I mean? I mean the fact that you can put money on who's going to die first. Did they have sex? Did they drink? Did they do drugs? They might die in this horror movie. It does seem odd to carry that subplot of morality and those who are immoral will die first when your movie includes setting people on fire, blowing people's heads off, and showing gratuitous amounts of boobs in the first part. I think this is something I might have to dive into, see if anyone else written anything on this, to try and explore and see if there was some sort of group meeting of all these horror directors to be like, yeah, we got to make sure that anyone who does sex, drugs, or drinks dies. Maybe someone's already written something compelling on it, and I'd love to find out. So if you know anything, put it down in the comments. Now, when trying to find grievances or things that I just don't like about the movie, it was actually kind of hard. And you might think, well, that means it's a really good movie.
Come on.
I wouldn't say really good, but I didn't really hate anything about it. Sure, the acting was cheesy, but that was kind of the novelty of the time of the 80s. Sure, it was a short runtime, more of like a extended TV episode rather than a full-on movie. But then again, it didn't overplay itself. It didn't have long builds-up. It was a very fast-paced movie. I guess the one slight grievance I have is the name Chopping Mall. No chopping occurs. Chopping Mall implies a slasher with an axe is going around chopping everyone in half. But alas, the actual movie was called Killbots, and upon release in box office, it didn't release well. In fact, most people said it was because they associated the word Killbots with Transformers. So anyways, they renamed it to Chopping Mall kind of as a last-ditch effort to get through the box office with okay numbers. So I don't think the name was their first priority. And even though it didn't do well at the box office, like I said, later on, once it released to video, it became a cult classic. So like I said before, I don't really have rating systems on movies. I kind of depend on how good the movie is by my enjoyment level and whether or not I would watch it. And to be honest, I enjoyed this movie. In fact, I've seen it twice in the last 2 weeks. Mainly for prepping for this video, but still. I don't think they ever set out to make any box office hit. I think they just set out to try and make a mall horror movie that was fast-paced. But what I love about this movie is it was in the 80s, which meant practical effects for just about everything they had to do with some in-camera tricks. I love the props of the robots. They're kind of menacing looking. They're short, but they're these humanless, voidless looking aspects, and they're creepy as hell. And every time they kill you, they tell you to have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
I imagine that if they would have filmed this movie around nowadays, they probably would have done mostly CGI for the robots, and they would have lost that little extra tangible factor, because you would just be able to edge out and tell that they were not real. Plus, you get better actor reactions with real physical props there, rather than something like a tennis ball on a stick. And while robots were no stranger to cinema at the time, and the 1984 Terminator probably still holds the record for the best prop robot in my opinion, I still think, like I said, these pulled off their look really well and gave us something a little bit more unique than I've seen in other movies that involve some sort of killer robot. And back to rating this, will I watch this movie again? You know, I just might. If I'm scrolling through one of my streaming apps and I see it on there, I might just be like, you know what, I got an hour to kill, let's put it on. Like I said, the action starts pretty quickly. After, of course, you get a little healthy dose of boobs and simulated sex. And then, of course, boom, everything goes off, and these killer robots are just the menaces. Now, even if you sat through this video without having seen the movie and you listened to me spoil just about everything, I guarantee you go watch it, you'll still enjoy it. It'll either make you laugh or just at least be mildly entertaining for an hour. And to be honest, it's kind of a softer way to start off October festivities with something like this rather than jumping deep into the heavy, really dark, scary movies. And that's it. Shorter video this time, but I think that Chopping Mall holds itself amongst multiple other 80s movies, whether you're in the horror genre, just the slasher genre, or anything like that. I think it was fun, enjoyable, and I'm definitely going to watch it again. But now I want to thank you for watching the video so much. Definitely get down in the comments. Let me know what you thought of Chopping Mall if you've seen it. Do you think it holds that title cult classic, or do you just think it's another trash movie that needs to be forgotten about? Click that like button if you liked it. Hit the subscribe button. Helps out the channel. And in your comments, also make suggestions of other movies you'd like to see on the channel, whether they're a horror movie, action movie, sad movie, drama movie, whatever it is, put it down there. I'll take a look, see if it's something on my purview, and we'll get going. And thank you again